For most of recorded history, power announced itself. It stood on elevated ground and made sure it was seen. Power wore crowns, uniforms, armor, and symbols meant to intimidate. It relied on visibility because visibility created fear, and fear created obedience. The king ruled because he could punish. The empire expanded because it could conquer. Authority was centralized, personal, and unmistakable. If power existed, you knew exactly where it lived. And because it was visible, it could be named, challenged, and, eventually, replaced. Revolutions did not happen because power was weak. They happened because power was clear. When people knew who ruled them, they could imagine life without that ruler. But over time, power encountered its greatest limitation. Force creates resistance. Fear works, but only temporarily. Every empire learned the same lesson the hard way. The louder power becomes, the more fragile it grows. So slowly, across centuries, power began to change not its goal, but its method. It stopped asking how to dominate bodies and started asking how to shape minds. As societies grew larger and more complex, direct control became inefficient. You could not rule millions of people through constant force. Armies were expensive. Violence destabilized trade. Punishment created martyrs. So power adapted. It learned to embed itself into structures that felt neutral: laws, institutions, norms, and procedures. Instead of commanding behavior, it designed environments where certain behaviors became the easiest, safest, or only viable option. Schools didn't teach obedience openly. They taught schedules, grading, permission, and hierarchy. Workplaces didn't demand loyalty. They rewarded compliance and framed it as professionalism. Economic systems didn't force participation. They made survival dependent on participation. Media didn't dictate beliefs. It curated attention. Power discovered that if you shape incentives, you shape choices. And if you shape choices, control becomes invisible. The brilliance of this shift was that no single person appeared to be in charge anymore. Authority was fragmented across departments, regulations, committees, and policies. When harm occurred, responsibility dissolved. No one decided, the system did. And systems, unlike rulers, cannot be confronted in the streets. Over time, power refined itself even further. It no longer needed to enforce rules aggressively, because people learned to enforce them on themselves. Expectations replaced orders. Metrics replaced judgment. Performance replaced purpose. Power hid inside numbers: productivity, efficiency, growth, optimization. These concepts sounded neutral, even virtuous, yet they quietly defined what mattered and what didn't. If something couldn't be measured, it lost value. If it didn't produce growth, it became expendable. Decisions that once required moral explanation were reframed as technical necessity. Suffering became a statistic. Displacement became restructuring. Control became management. And because these processes were abstract, power became untouchable. You couldn't argue with the market. You couldn't protest an algorithm. You couldn't overthrow a policy written in neutral language. Power had learned its most important lesson. The best control doesn't feel like control at all. It feels like reality. In its most advanced form, power no longer presents itself as authority. It presents itself as common sense. It hides in plain sight by becoming invisible, normalized, and unquestioned. It tells people they are free while narrowing the range of viable choices. It encourages expression while quietly setting the boundaries of acceptability. It does not silence dissent. It absorbs it, repackages it, and moves forward unchanged. Surveillance becomes voluntary when convenience is attached. Compliance becomes personal responsibility. Failure becomes individual weakness rather than systemic design. And the final transformation is this: people stop asking who holds power and start asking how to adapt to it. They optimize themselves instead of challenging structures. They blame themselves for outcomes shaped long before their choices began. This is when power fully succeeds, not when it dominates openly, but when it disappears into everyday life, convincing people that the world is simply the way it is. Because the most enduring power is not the one that rules from above, but the one that lives quietly inside belief, habit, and identity, unseen, unnamed, and therefore rarely resisted.